My birthday month has come to a close, and it's time to wrap up all the books I read in October. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and welcome to my October reading wrap up. As I mentioned at the beginning, October was my birthday month and it was a pretty good reading month for the most part. I read some really wonderful books. I read something for Victober. I had one DNF, so that wasn't the greatest, but at least it's a book that's off my shelf and no longer sitting there waiting for me to read, and I'm going to pass it along to someone else who might love it more than I did. So I think I'm going to do this the way I have done this the past few months, where I am going to start with my lowest rated read and then work my way up to the cream of the crop. And really, I mean, other than my DNF, there wasn't anything else that was really like not good. Some were just better than others. So grab yourself a warm beverage and settle in, and let's get into my October reads. Let us start off with my DNF for the month. And this was so disappointing because the premise of this sounded so wonderful and it didn't work for me, and that was Radio Girls by Sarah Jane Stratford. And this book is about the beginning of the BBC, and there is a young girl who gets a job there. Her name is Maisie Musgrave, and I think she's been raised in America, but I think her father was British, even though she didn't know her father. And she's had a bit of a strange upbringing, and she is nearly destitute. She's living in a rooming house with a bunch of other young girls, and she is desperate for a job, and she goes and interviews for the BBC and somehow manages to procure a job. It's really kind of amazing that she does. She comes across as very timid, very meek, and it doesn't seem fitting to what has gone on in her life up until this point. She joined up to be a nurse or a nurse's aide during World War I, and she was only 14 at the time, and she claimed to be 17. And for somebody who had that kind of gumption, her character in the present day, it just didn't seem to match that, and so I really struggled with that. I also felt like the dialogue wasn't completely realistic. I wasn't getting a good sense. There was a large cast of characters, but I didn't feel like they were getting fleshed out very well. I read about 75 pages of this, and then I just decided I was not enjoying it, and life is too short to read books that you are not enjoying. So this unfortunately was a DNF for me, but if anybody else knows of any other books, because there is a character in here, Hilda Matheson, and apparently she is based on a real person, the real Hilda Matheson, who was influential at the beginnings of the BBC. And I would love to read something about her, whether it's a nonfiction or a historical fiction where she's featured, because she sounds like a fascinating woman. So if anyone has any recommendations for that, I would definitely love to hear them. My next two books were audiobooks that I listened to this month, and the first one was Mrs. Quinns' Rise to Fame by Olivia Ford. And this is set in England, and it's set amongst a fictionalized Great British baking show, or Bake Off, as we aficionados like to call it, just like the Brits do. And there is this woman, Jennifer Quinn, and she is in her 70s, and she applies to be on the baking show. I mean, all of this sounds just wonderful. And there were aspects of this book that I really, really enjoyed and were really cozy, and there was lots of baking, and all of that was lovely. The thing that I didn't like about this book was Jennifer lies to her husband repeatedly, over and over. And Bernard is his name, and he is, or sounds like, just the most warm and caring and wonderful husband, and she's been keeping a very big secret from him for the entirety of their marriage. They're about to have their 50th wedding anniversary, 60th wedding, I don't know. They're on the cusp of a major anniversary, and it just didn't seem in keeping with the type of person that he is and how Jennifer was in other aspects of her life, that she would keep all these secrets from him. It's one of those situations where it felt like a plot device that the author created to put tension into the novel that I felt like the author at work. It didn't feel natural to the story to me. It felt like, oh, I need to have some tension here. And I think there would have been plenty of tension even if we hadn't had these secrets between the husband and wife. There was a big underlying storyline, and I think that could have been handled in a slightly different way that would have worked better for me, and would have negated the need for Jennifer to lie to Bernard for their marriage. So that is all I will say because I don't want to spoil it, but I loved it on audio. It was absolutely wonderful. The narration was fantastic. And like I said, the aspect of the baking show and the underlying storyline itself, this sort of dramatic thing that's happened in Jennifer's life, I really felt like that could have been worked in such a way that would have made this just a really wonderful novel. For me, it was just kind of middle of the road because there were things I liked and things I didn't like. So I recommend it, but with a little bit of trepidation. And then the second audiobook that I listened to this month was a nonfiction book, which I actually pre-ordered. This might have been the first time I ever pre-ordered an audiobook. No, I take that back. I've pre-ordered audiobooks before. But I did pre-order this because as soon as I heard about it, I absolutely love this actress. And that was I Haven't Been Entirely Honest with You by Miranda Hart. I first heard about Miranda Hart or saw her on Call the Midwife, and probably she's Chummy on Call the Midwife if you've watched that show, and she is an absolute delight in Call the Midwife. I loved her character so much, and she is just such a charming personality. And I know she has a British sitcom, I think it might be called Miranda, and I need to watch that because it sounds like it would be right up my alley. I just find her so funny and endearing, and she's just one of those people that I find myself drawn to. So when I heard that she had a new memoir coming out, she's written another memoir, I believe, that's maybe just a little bit more about, I'm not sure, general things, humorous stories, her acting career, I don't know. But this one is specifically about her dealing with chronic illness. And she has had a chronic illness throughout the majority of her life. And finally, she gets some answers and starts getting herself well. And from amongst all of this debilitating chronic illness, she finds sort of nuggets in her life, little treasures that she, as she calls them, that she uses to sort of help her go on with her life and find meaning in her life and find ways to make life feel good to her. And there wasn't anything super revelatory in her little treasures, but it was really lovely just to hear her talk about her experience. And even though she was relating it to chronic illness, and that's not something that I've personally experienced, I do think you can take things away, little nuggets away from what she shares, and apply that to your own life. Just slowing down and taking things moment by moment and reveling in all of the little things in our life rather than giving into this sort of go, 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 do, you know, constantly connected to social media and the internet and always needing more in life, that maybe that's not the number one priority. And I just really liked all of her takeaways. She's very funny. She does have a bit of a potty mouth, so I will give a little context there. So if that's not something you enjoy, I mean, it's not terrible, but she does swear. But she's just such a lovely, quirky person, and I appreciate that. And I really enjoyed this. So that was definitely a win for me. And I listened to it in just a couple of days because it was very, very readable. The rest of my books are all physical books that I read this month. And the next book that I read, finally, I did it. I said I was going to do it, and I finally have. I read my first misread book, which was Village School. And this was just so lovely. It was a wonderful introduction to Fairacre, to Miss Reed, to her school, to all of the characters in the village. And each chapter, I mean, it is a novel. Like, I wasn't sure when I went into it if it was going to feel like short stories, but it is interconnected, even though each chapter is sort of a little vignette in the school year, and each chapter has a specific event that happens during it. But I really did feel like it read like a novel, even though it kind of has that vignette feel to it. But I have heard that this series gets better as it goes along, and I really love this. If you just want something quiet, cozy, English village life, something you can just kind of sink into and find a bit of calm in your day, then I highly recommend Village School. So glad I read it. Can't wait to read book 2. Then the next book that I read was with my Gilded Age buddy read group, and for October we read The Ghost Stories of Edith Wharton. And I've had this book sitting on my shelf for a couple of years, and I've been wanting to read it in October, so it was so lovely to buddy read this with my friends, and we all thoroughly enjoyed it. As with most short story collections, there were definitely stories that I preferred over others, and I marked 5 in here that really stood out to me. And the titles of those stories were the first story, which is The Lady's Maid's Bell, and then Afterward and Kerful or Kerfal, we're not sure how to pronounce that, Mr. Jones, and Pomegranate Seed. And I think of all of those, probably Afterward, Kerfal, and the Pomegranate Seed are the 3 that will stick with me the most. I have to say that these stories are they're not like scary ghosts coming out of the woodwork kind of a thing, spooky things happening. I mean, some spooky things do happen, but they're very psychological, and there's a lot of morality at play in what Edith Wharton is saying amidst these ghost stories. And that was really fascinating, and it led to some really interesting discussions with our group about that piece of things. And there's an introduction in here by Edith Wharton, and she basically says, in order for ghost stories to work, the reader has to go along with the author on the ride. Like, you have to, it's like in the theater where you suspend your disbelief. You have to sort of suspend your disbelief about ghosts and just go in for the ride. And I really recommend this collection if you're looking for something atmospheric to read next October. You can't go wrong with The Ghost Stories of Edith Wharton. This was just wonderful. And I'll definitely be rereading the short stories. I don't know if I'll reread them all, but I could definitely see dipping in and out of it. There I go again, swimming in my books. I could definitely see myself, kind of picking and choosing a short story or 2 to read each October. I think that would be just lovely and very festive for the Halloween season. And then the next book that I read was another nonfiction book, and that is Reveries at Stillmeadow, A Woman's Precious Moments from the Stillmeadow Books of Gladys Taber. Let me tell you, I've been wanting to read Gladys Taber for a really long time, but her books are very hard to get a hold of, especially the vintage editions. I keep my eye out for them constantly, but when I do see them, they are quite pricey, or else they're just not available. So I managed to grab this one from Thrift Books when I saw it come up, and it is just a tiny little, I think it's just a Hallmark, yeah, it's a Hallmark edition, so I think Hallmark put this out, and it's just got some lovely little tidbits from her different Stillmeadow books and just kind of little seasonal things, and there's some recipes in here. I mean, this is a very slim little book. I read it very, very quickly. It was just lovely, and I just kind of, you know, read a few pages every night before bed, and that was perfect. And I could definitely see myself kind of doing that same thing at different times when I just need something sort of quiet and contemplative to read. And then the next book was just an utter delight. Actually, the last 3 books that I'm going to talk about were just the highlights of my month. And the first one was Volume 7 in the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. This is the last currently published volume in the Emma M. Lyon series. Volume 8 is coming out in December, and I cannot wait. And for those of you keeping track, yes, there is going to be a read-along of all of the Emma M. Lyon books next year here on my channel. And we'll be reading 1 volume a month starting in January and ending in August with Volume 8, unless Volume 9 comes out before August, and then we'll read Volume 9 in September. But I'm not going to tell you too much about this book because you need to read Emma M. Lyon in order to just kind of follow the story. But this takes place in 1883. Now I think we're in 1884, and Emma M. Lyon is a young woman. She's returned to London. She lives in this neighborhood called St. Crispian's, and she lives with her cousin Archibald, who is a bit of a nemesis for Emma. And she doesn't have much money, and she has a sort of gang of friends that she collects, and she loves to read, and she doesn't have a very big library, but she collects books as the volumes of her journals go on, and there's always a list of books that she has in her current library at the end of each volume of the journals. That is just a little fun added bookish tidbit that I really, really enjoy. And I'm very excited to reread all of these. I think Volume 7 might be my favorite entry so far. We really see some advances in some of the plots that are going on, and that was really fun. And there was a lot of kind of dramatic tension in this, and I couldn't turn the pages fast enough. I think I read this in 2 days. So it's delightful. But I will be having an announcement video coming out in a couple of weeks sharing all the details for the Emma M. Lyon read-along. So make sure you have notifications turned on for my videos so that you do not miss that if you want to participate. But this was so lovely. The next book is my only book that I read for Victober this year, and it also happened to be the Cozy Reader Book Club read for October, and that is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And this is my second Wilkie Collins. I have also read No Name, and I cannot wait to read more by him. I absolutely loved this. I found this to be such a page turner. It was the pace in this was just fantastic. It reminded me of when I read like a modern day mystery or thriller where you just can't turn the pages fast enough because you have to know what's coming next. That's exactly how this book read to me. I found it very readable. The prose was not super challenging. You know, I know sometimes people think that classics can be a little bit on the challenging side, but I really found this to be just propulsive is the best word I can use. In this, we follow Walter Hartwright, and he has taken a commission to be an art tutor for 2 young women at this home in the country, and he is about to leave from London to do that. And late one night, he stumbles upon this woman in white on a road outside London, and she needs help, and he helps her. And then he sort of becomes a bit obsessed with her and what happened to her, and she ends up having a connection to the house where he is going to teach, and the story goes from there. and we meet the two young women who he is tutoring, Marion, who is the older sister, and Laura is the younger sister, and we just follow what happens to Walter and Marion and Laura and the woman in white throughout the story, and it's very twisty-turny, and you can tell some of the members of book club did say that they felt like the middle section could have been tightened up a little bit. I didn't personally feel that way, but I can understand why. And I think because this novel was serialized, and obviously Wilkie Collins was being paid for each serialization that he put out. So there was definitely a little bit in the middle where it was probably more meandering than it needed to be, but I still think this is an amazing novel. Absolutely, absolutely loved it. I really want to read The Moonstone now, and yes, so loved this book. I'm glad that it was my pick for Victober this year. And then the final book I'm going to talk about, which is actually the final book I read in October. I finished it on Halloween, and that is Gody Night by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is the 10th novel in the Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series. And in this one, Lord Peter Wimsey actually plays a bit of a backseat in this one for a big chunk of the novel. We mostly follow Harriet Vane. She is returned to the school at Oxford where she graduated from for Gody Night, which is kind of like a reunion night for graduates to come back to the school. And she ends up learning about a sort of poison pen letters that are being sent to different members at the college and staff members and students, and she is asked to help find out what's going on. So she ends up staying at Oxford and trying to figure out who is causing all this mischief, and they're pulling pranks and doing all these things, and then something really kind of terrible happens to one of the students and who's made a target. There's actually no murder in this mystery novel. So I did have a viewer who asked for recommendations for mysteries that don't have murders in them. So I can absolutely recommend this one. I mean, it does have some kind of dramatic things happen in it, but it's not murder. There's no deaths at all in this book. I love everything about this. I love the collegiate setting. I love that we get to learn more about Harriet Vane and who she is as a person, why she keeps turning down Peter's proposals for marriage, and we get to see more interactions between her and Peter Wimsey, and that is just wonderful. The two of them together are such a fantastic duo. I can't say enough good things about this. I absolutely loved it. I keep saying, I think the past like 3 months, I've been like, this is my favorite in the Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series so far. And I'm going to say it again this month. Definitely my favorite. This was a reread for me, but I really didn't remember that much about it. So it really was like reading it for the first time. I adore this novel. I think it's a fantastic mystery, and the resolution of it feels completely realistic. And I kind of had an inkling of who was behind everything. So I won't say it's a super difficult whodunit to figure out, but just the whole ride to get there was absolutely wonderful. So I definitely recommend this one. So yes, Gody Night. And that is it. That is my October wrap up. I read 9 books in October. I had one of them was a DNF, so I finished 8 books, 2 audiobooks, the rest were physical books, and I actually read 2 nonfiction in October, so that was kind of nice heading into nonfiction November to have read a couple of extra nonfiction books this month. And I read some really, really wonderful books. I'd love to hear from you. Have you read any of these books that I read? What did you think about them? And how was your October reading? Did you read anything particularly wonderful in October? Did you participate in Victober? And if so, what did you read for that? Because I'm always looking for good Victorian recommendations. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you could hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Thank you so, so much for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye.